What's going on, everyone? How you doing? Hopefully you are ready to learn some vocabulary. This is from part 3 of the Bully, and I like making these vocabulary lessons sometimes because you can watch these over and over to learn the words. You can have the subtitles at the bottom of the screen in English, which would be best, but in the language you are most comfortable with, that also works. So let's take a look at some of these words here. I'll bring it up. This is just from the Quizlet that is available on Google Classroom. And we have some tricky ones, some very tricky ones. We have gaze, glaze, grazed. So not easy. Whoever said English was easy is wrong. So let's look at the first one. Oh, you know what? Before that, I do want to just review a couple that we had at the beginning of the book. So decaying. We're also talking about teeth in reading class. So remember, if you don't brush your teeth very often, oh, I got a dentist appointment today, by the way. Don't let me forget, 3 o'clock today, I got a dentist appointment. Your teeth will decay, which means to slowly become worse. And if you look at the sentence down there, the old school is decaying and will eventually fall apart. Just like the school, EL, right? The old school, nobody is in that old school. It's going to decay. I think they are going to tear it down before it decays, but if nobody touched it, it would just continue to get worse, to decay eventually. That's a good word. It means it is definitely going to happen at some time. So eventually, you will all graduate, which will be cool. And I wanted to go over the difference between vacant and abandoned. So vacant means it's just empty, probably for a short period of time. Abandoned means they're probably never coming back. They left that thing alone and probably never coming back. So the old school is definitely abandoned. It's vacant too. Nobody is in there, but nobody really plans on going back. So it's just been kind of abandoned. Remember, we talked about children can be abandoned, which is, of course, super sad. Now, let's get into some of these newer words. We got gazed and also glazed. So let's talk about them at the same time. At the bottom, you can see the man gazed at the beautiful woman. Now, hopefully he's not being creepy about it, but probably he is. I don't think you can look at someone for a long period of time without being creepy. Let's look at the definition. It just means looked at something for a long period of time. Now, we're going to talk about glare in a minute. They both mean to look at for a long period of time, but they're a little bit different. The next one of my favorites, glaze. Glaze, it means covered with a thin and shiny surface. You might have glaze on donuts. You might have glaze on ice or pottery. Ice, I have a sentence for you. When ice can kind of glaze a surface, it can be very dangerous. So I ordered a glazed donut. That means the donut has a thin layer of sugar on top, like liquid sugar, like melted sugar. Very similar to that picture there. Now, we would call that a bundt cake right there, but that has a glaze of sugar on it as well. And here's where it gets a little dangerous sometimes, is that especially in the early winter or the early spring, where it's not quite cold enough to snow, then you can have like rain falling and it will form a thin layer of ice on everything. Glaze over is an English phrasal verb we have. So the sidewalk began to glaze over with ice. That's when you have a lot of people slipping, falling, getting hurt. We've been there before. It's not very fun. Speaking of not very fun, How about the next one? Make it a little bit smaller here. The next one is dread. That just means that you have a lot of fear. Look at this thing. I'm dreading the English test because I didn't study enough. So anything that is coming up in your future and you are pretty nervous about it, like scared, you would say dread. So it can be a verb like I dread the day I have to take the test, or it can be a noun. I have a lot of dread. So both of those work. Menacing, right there. When you think something bad might happen, menacing. If you look at that bully that's towering over that little person there, that is definitely a menacing figure. I think I talked about it in class. Maybe you have some clouds in the distance and they're kind of dark. Like, ooh, those are menacing clouds. Like something bad could happen. Yeah, it's a little different from dread. Menacing is like a little bit closer to happening. Yeah, and I don't think you would call a test menacing. No, probably not. People, clouds, ooh, a dog, a neighborhood. I just got a text message. I must be popular. Oh. My daughter. I'll read it later. All right, what about this next one? Glare. Oh. We talked about gazed. Glare is the same way, but it's in a more menacing way. So you're still looking for a long period of time, but it's a menacing kind of intention. Like you are mad at somebody. Maybe your little brother or sister. Maybe they ate the last of the cereal and you're waking up, you're mad at them, you might glare at them. So let's look at the bottom here. Glare is like gaze because you look at something for a long time, but glare is usually a mean look. The next two go together as well. It can be very difficult right here. So we have two words, lumbered, which is a verb, but then you have lumber, which can be a noun. So lumber can be a verb meaning to walk in a very awkward kind of way, like it's very difficult for you to do. And in that picture, I have the picture of an elephant. So I think when elephants walk, they kind of lumber. Let's look at the definition for this. I'll pull it up just so that we're clear. To move in a slow, heavy way. So it's usually when things are big and kind of heavy. Elephant is the perfect thing to say lumbered. Maybe a train that's kind of slow. It's just like it's lumbering along. But how about this? It's not exactly nice, but the old heavyset man, it's a very nice way to say kind of fat, kind of big. The old heavyset man lumbered up the stairs. Yeah. It's when walking is very hard for somebody and they're kind of big already, lumbered. You know, even at the end of the day, maybe you're lying in bed and you're like, man, I need to use the bathroom or something. You might lumber to the bathroom. It just means it's kind of a hard walk for you. But we also have lumber, which can mean wood, like usually extra wood. So she had a lot of lumber left over after building the doghouse. Maybe she bought too much wood. She has some extra. Like my brother does a lot of work with wood, and he has a bunch of lumber in his backyard. It's just like odds and ends, pieces of wood. You might be able to use it later on a project, but all right, doesn't get any easier here. Well, rim is not too bad. But graze we'll get to. It just means the edge or border of anything. So glasses have rims, like right at the top. I got a glass somewhere. I'll be right back. Hang on. All right, I have this water bottle here, and we can look at the rim. So the rim is just the edge of something. See? That's the rim of my water bottle. In the picture there, That would be called the Pacific Rim. I'll make it a little bigger. So the Pacific Rim, it's the Pacific Ocean, and that's called the Ring of Fire. Now, if you look, Pacific Ocean, you got California there, you got Japan there, you have the west coast of South America. And one thing about that area is that there are a lot of earthquakes and a lot of volcanoes in that area. So it's the Pacific Rim. It's also called the Ring of Fire. The rim is just like the edge of anything. All right, let me go over here. Got a word for you. She gazed, bring that word back again, like looking in a nice way, usually, at the deep hole from the rim of the canyon. So like I can imagine the rim of the canyon. If you take a couple steps, you're probably falling a long way. So she's staring down from the rim of the canyon. Hope that helps. Gosh, this word's tough, man. Grazed. It sounds so much like glazed and gazed, doesn't it? But when you graze, you're probably an animal, and you're probably eating like grass in kind of a lazy way. Like they're not chomping on it. They're not eating it quickly. Just like the cows grazed on grass. Sometimes people will graze. I know my mom would say this like during the holidays when we had food set out on the table, and people would just graze all day long on the food. But my mom didn't like it when it wasn't a holiday and I would just keep eating things. Yeah, I was a heavy kid. I was a heavy set kid sometimes. Still kind of a heavy set adult. But anyways, grazing. People can graze too. It's usually not a good thing. You're eating slowly all day. And the last one, it's actually pretty straightforward. Stucco. Just our book used it, so that's why I wanted to let you know what it is. But you won't see much of this in Maine. Usually a roof, and it looks like that. It's kind of delicate. If you look at the top there, it's kind of delicate. So we don't have many stucco roofs in Maine because our weather is too harsh in the winter. But if you go out west, if you go out to California, where the book takes place, well, he moves from Philadelphia to California, you might see more stucco roofs out there. All right. Hopefully this helps. You can watch this a couple times, get to know those vocabulary words.